Have you ever felt completely alone while surrounded by everything money can buy? What if the walls we build to protect ourselves are the very ones keeping us from what we truly need? We spend our lives chasing success, building fortunes, and creating perfect facades, only to discover that emptiness echoes louder in marble halls than in humble homes. This is the story of a man who owned the world but possessed nothing of real value, until an unexpected connection taught him the difference between existing and truly living. The magnificent Reed estate stood as a testament to one man's triumph. 20,000 square feet of architectural brilliance perched on 5 manicured acres, every detail precisely crafted to showcase wealth and achievement. Yet behind its imposing gates lay a truth that wealth couldn't disguise. Loneliness has never respected financial barriers. Inside these walls, Alexander Reed moved through his perfectly ordered days like a ghost haunting his own life. His heart had hardened not from cruelty but from neglect, like a muscle forgotten and unused until it barely remembered its purpose. The silence in the sprawling rooms wasn't peaceful. It was deafening, a constant reminder that success without connection is the most elegant form of failure. What does it cost to let someone see beyond your carefully constructed walls? What happens when someone refuses to be intimidated by your defenses and instead sees the abandoned child still waiting for warmth behind your accomplishments? For Alexander Reed, the answer would arrive in the most unexpected form to the quiet determination of a woman who understood that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply to be seen for who you truly are. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to Heartbeat Narratives, your ultimate destination for all things romances, connection, and heartfelt stories. I'm thrilled to have you here, sharing this amazing journey of exploring love in all its beautiful, complex, and magical forms. Whether you're a hopeless romantic, someone searching for relationship insights, or just love diving into heartwarming content, you're exactly where you need to be. If you're enjoying what you see, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could hit that subscribe button to stay connected with our Heartbeat Narratives community. Drop a like to show some love, support, and motivation. Share this video with someone who might need a little romance in their life. Your support means the world to me and helps us continue creating content that celebrates love, connection, and the beautiful stories that bring us together. The morning light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished marble floors of Alexander Reed's mansion. Standing at 6'2" with steely gray eyes and salt and pepper hair, Alexander cut an imposing figure as he surveyed the silent grandeur of his home. Every piece of furniture, every curated artwork spoke of wealth and taste, yet nothing spoke back. At 45, Alexander had built an empire from a single tech startup. Reed Innovations had revolutionized supply chain management software, making him a billionaire before 40. The financial press called him visionary. Business schools studied his strategies. Competitors feared his tactical brilliance. But no one knew him. He straightened his custom-tailored suit and glanced at his watch, a rare Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's homes. The empty breakfast table before him stretched long enough to seat 12. Today, as usual, it would seat 1. "Mr. Reed, your car is ready," his house manager announced from the doorway. "Thank you, Howard," Alexander replied, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality he perfected over years of boardroom battles. As the sleek Mercedes pulled away from the mansion, Alexander gazed back at the sprawling estate. 20,000 square feet of architectural perfection nestled in 5 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds, a monument to success that echoed with silence. His phone buzzed with an email from his executive assistant, his third personal assistant in as many months had quit. The message cited the usual reasons: demanding schedule, exacting standards, lack of work-life balance. Alexander sighed. What they never said, but what he knew to be true, was that working for him felt like serving a machine rather than a man. By evening, when Alexander returned to the mansion, a personnel file awaited him. The HR department had already selected a replacement assistant. Efficiency was one of the few things he could count on in his life. He flipped through the file. Emily Carter, 34, single mother, excellent references despite gaps in employment. Something in her interview responses had impressed his HR director enough to flag her as uniquely suited to Mr. Reed's management style. Alexander snorted softly at that diplomatic phrasing. He knew what people said about him. Brilliant but cold, demanding but distant. He closed the file. Miss Carter would start tomorrow. Unlike those before her, she would either adapt to his world or disappear from it. What Alexander didn't know was that Emily Carter would neither adapt nor disappear. She would transform it entirely. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to Heartbeat Narratives, your ultimate destination for all things romances, connection, and heartfelt stories. I'm thrilled to have you here, sharing this amazing journey of exploring love in all its beautiful, complex, and magical forms. Whether you're a hopeless romantic, someone searching for relationship insights, or just love diving into heartwarming content, you're exactly where you need to be. If you're enjoying what you see, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could hit that subscribe button to stay connected with our Heartbeat Narratives community. Drop a like to show some love, support, and motivation. Share this video with someone who might need a little romance in their life. Your support means a world to me and helps us continue creating content that celebrates love, connection, and the beautiful stories that bring us together. The morning light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished marble floors of Alexander Reed's mansion. Standing at 6'2" with steely gray eyes and salt and pepper hair, Alexander cut an imposing figure as he surveyed the silent grandeur of his home. Every piece of furniture, every curated artwork spoke of wealth and taste. Yet nothing spoke back. At 45, Alexander had built an empire from a single tech startup. Reed Innovations had revolutionized supply chain management software, making him a billionaire before 40. The financial press called him visionary. Business schools studied his strategies. Competitors feared his tactical brilliance. But no one knew him. He straightened his custom-tailored suit and glanced at his watch, a rare Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's homes. The empty breakfast table before him stretched long enough to seat 12. Today, as usual, it would seat 1. "Mr. Reed, your car is ready," his house manager announced from the doorway. "Thank you, Howard," Alexander replied, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality he perfected over years of boardroom battles. As the sleek Mercedes pulled away from the mansion, Alexander gazed back at the sprawling estate. 20,000 square feet of architectural perfection nestled in 5 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds. A monument to success that echoed with silence. His phone buzzed with an email from his executive assistant. His third personal assistant in as many months had quit. The message cited the usual reasons: demanding schedule, exacting standards, lack of work-life balance. Alexander sighed. What they never said, but what he knew to be true, was that working for him felt like serving a machine rather than a man. By evening, when Alexander returned to the mansion, a personnel file awaited him. The HR department had already selected a replacement assistant. Efficiency was one of the few things he could count on in his life. He flipped through the file. Emily Carter, 34, single mother, excellent references despite gaps in employment. Something in her interview responses had impressed his HR director enough to flag her as uniquely suited to Mr. Reed's management style. Alexander snorted softly at that diplomatic phrasing. He knew what people said about him: brilliant but cold, demanding but distant. He closed the file. Ms. Carter would start tomorrow, and like those before her, she would either adapt to his world or disappear from it. What Alexander didn't know was that Emily Carter would neither adapt nor disappear. She would transform it entirely. Emily Carter stood at the imposing gates of the Reed estate, clutching her worn leather portfolio to her chest. At 5'5", with warm brown eyes and chestnut hair pulled back in practical bun, she appeared ordinary at first glance. But there was a quiet determination in the set of her shoulders and a perceptive intelligence in her gaze that hinted at deeper complexity. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. The job paid triple her previous salary, enough to finally move her daughter, Lily, out of their cramped apartment and into a neighborhood with better schools. Enough to stop choosing between paying for Lily's dance classes or putting money aside for college. Howard greeted her at the door with professional courtesy, giving her a brisk tour of the mansion while explaining her duties. The house seemed more like a museum than a home, pristine and perfectly arranged, but devoid of life's natural chaos and warmth. "Mr. Reed prefers his schedule managed with precision," Howard explained. He expects his coffee at exactly 6:30 a.m., prepared with 1 tablespoon of the Ethiopian blend, black. Breakfast is served at 7 a.m. sharp, protein forward, minimal carbohydrates. The driver arrives at 7:45 a.m. Mr. Reed returns most evenings between 8 o'clock and 9 p.m., unless there are evening engagements, which will be noted in his calendar. Emily absorbed the information, noting not just the instructions but the subtle dynamics of the household. The staff moved efficiently but spoke in hushed tones. Everything revolved around Alexander Reed's needs and preferences, yet the man himself seemed strangely absent even when physically present. When Alexander finally appeared for their introduction, Emily wasn't intimidated by his imposing presence or clipped manner. Instead, she noticed a fatigue around his eyes and a slight tension in his jaw, signs of a man carrying invisible burdens. "Ms. Carter," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "I trust Howard has briefed you on your responsibilities." "Yes, Mr. Reed," she replied, "and I've reviewed your calendar for the next 2 weeks. I've taken the liberty of noting some potential efficiencies in your schedule." Alexander raised an eyebrow. None of his previous assistants had offered suggestions before even officially starting. "Is that so? You have 3 separate lunch meetings downtown next Tuesday," Emily explained. "I thought you might prefer consolidating them into one location to minimize travel time. I've already checked with each party, and they're amenable to the adjusted arrangement." A flicker of surprise crossed Alexander's face. "That's acceptable. Make the arrangements." As he walked away, Emily noticed something else. Beneath the commanding exterior was profound loneliness. The mansion reminded her of her daughter's dollhouse, perfect in every detail, but lifeless unless someone cared enough to breathe life into it. Emily decided then that her job would involve more than managing Alexander Reed's schedule. She would bring humanity back into this hollow space, even if he didn't yet know he needed it. The changes began subtly. In her first week, Emily added fresh flowers to the main rooms of the mansion. Not ostentatious arrangements, but thoughtful selections that brought color and fragrance to the sterile spaces. When Alexander didn't comment, she continued, gradually introducing small elements of warmth. A cashmere throw draped over the leather sofa in his study, a collection of interesting books on the coffee table, classical music playing softly in the background. She also began leaving handwritten notes with his morning coffee. Brief, professional reminders about his day that nevertheless carried a personal touch absent from digital communications. The first time Alexander found one, he stared at it for a long moment, tracing the elegant cursor with his fingertip before slipping it into his pocket rather than discarding it. By the 3rd week, Emily had memorized Alexander's preferences but began gently expanding them. When she learned he enjoyed salmon, she arranged for the chef to prepare it with different accompaniments each time. When she discovered his preference for classical music, she created playlists that introduced him to composers beyond his usual repertoire. Most significantly, Emily refused to be invisible. Unlike previous assistants who had treated Alexander with fearful deference, she maintained a quiet confidence in their interactions. She didn't chatter unnecessarily, respecting his preference for efficiency, but neither did she shrink from genuine conversation when appropriate. "You've been working late every night this week, Mr. Reed," she commented one evening, placing a cup of herbal tea on his desk. "Perhaps you might consider taking tomorrow evening off. The Boston Symphony is performing Mahler. I've heard you playing his symphonies in your study." Alexander looked up from his laptop with mild surprise. "You've been paying attention to my music selections?" "It's my job to pay attention, sir," Emily replied simply. Alexander studied her for a moment. "Do you enjoy Mahler, Miss Carter?" "I'm more of a Debussy person myself," she admitted with a small smile. "But I can appreciate Mahler's emotional depth." It was their first real conversation, brief but authentic. Alexander returned to his work without committing to the symphony suggestion, but the next evening, his calendar remained conspicuously clear after 7 p.m. Emily noticed but didn't comment. Instead, she left the Boston Symphony program on his desk with a note. "The second movement is particularly moving." She didn't know if he attended, but the program disappeared, and the following morning, she found Mahler's Fifth Symphony playing softly in his study. 6 weeks into Emily's tenure, Alexander was scheduled to return from a business trip to Tokyo late Friday night. The negotiations had been particularly challenging, extending his stay by 2 days. Emily had been managing the cascade of schedule adjustments while preparing for his return. On Friday, after coordinating with the rest of the staff to ensure everything would be perfect for Alexander's arrival, Emily handled one final task: delivering a portfolio of urgent documents to his bedroom suite, where he could review them first thing in the morning. The master suite was a revelation. Minimalist yet luxurious, dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's gardens. As Emily placed the portfolio on his desk, exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her. She'd been working 16-hour days to accommodate the time difference with Tokyo, handling both household matters and urgent business communications. "Just 5 minutes," she murmured, sinking into a plush armchair near the window. The late afternoon sun bathed the room in golden light, and the chair enveloped her in unexpected comfort. Before she realized what was happening, her eyes drifted closed. Alexander's flight landed early. The negotiations had concluded more successfully than anticipated, and he had managed to secure a seat on an earlier connection. Feeling uncharacteristically satisfied, he decided to surprise his household by arriving without announcement. The mansion was quiet when he entered, most of the staff having been dismissed for the evening, since his arrival wasn't expected until much later. Alexander made his way to his bedroom, loosening his tie as he walked. When he opened the door, the sight before him stopped him in his tracks. Emily was asleep in the armchair, her face softened in repose, a strand of hair falling across her cheek. The portfolio she prepared lay perfectly positioned on his desk, beside a handwritten note welcoming him home and summarizing essential matters requiring his attention. Alexander's first instinct was irritation at the breach of professional boundaries. But as he observed Emily, clearly exhausted from managing his affairs, something unfamiliar stirred within him. Not since childhood had he returned home to find someone waiting for him, caring about his arrival. Instead of waking her, Alexander quietly backed out of the room and closed the door. He retreated to one of the guest suites, issuing instructions to Howard not to disturb Miss Carter. In the morning, Emily woke with a jolt, horrified to find herself still in Alexander's bedroom. When she rushed downstairs, apologies tumbling from her lips, she found him calmly eating breakfast in the sunroom, a space he rarely used. "Mr. Reed, I am so terribly sorry about last night. I don't know how You've been working overtime to accommodate my schedule in Tokyo," Alexander interrupted, his tone neutral. Fatigue is an understandable consequence. Emily stood frozen, waiting for the dismissal she was certain would follow. Instead, Alexander gestured a chair across from him. "Join me for breakfast, Miss Carter. We have several matters to discuss regarding next week's schedule." Stunned, Emily took the offered seat. As the conversation progressed, focusing on business matters, she realized that Alexander wasn't going to mention finding her asleep in his room again. More surprisingly, there was a subtle shift in his demeanor, a slight softening around the edges, an additional second of eye contact before looking away. Neither of them knew it then, but the accidental vulnerability had cracked open a door between them that professionalism alone could never have unlocked. The weeks following the incident, as Emily privately termed it, brought subtle but significant changes to her relationship with Alexander. He began acknowledging her presence more fully, a nod when entering a room, brief inquiries about her day, small expressions of appreciation for tasks completed. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Alexander returned early from the office, looking drained after a contentious board meeting. Emily was in the kitchen, having just picked up her daughter from school due to a sudden fever. With the nanny unavailable on short notice, she'd had no choice but to bring Lily to the mansion while arranging alternative care. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed." Emily apologized when Alexander discovered them. "Lily's school called, and I couldn't." "Is she ill?" Alexander interrupted, his gaze shifting to the subdued 7-year-old sitting at the kitchen island with a coloring book. "Just a fever. I've called my neighbor, but she won't be available for another hour." Alexander surprised both of them by addressing Lily directly. "Hello, Lily. I'm Alexander." The little girl looked up with curious eyes. "You have a really big house," she observed. Something remarkable happened then. Alexander smiled. Not the practiced smile he used in business settings, but a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. It is rather large, isn't it? Perhaps too large for just one person. Lily nodded sagely. Mom says big houses need lots of people to make them happy houses. Emily flushed with embarrassment, but Alexander's smile only deepened. Your mother is very wise. He turned to Emily. There's no need to call your neighbor. Lily can rest in the garden room. It has excellent natural light for coloring until she feels better. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep on a comfortable sofa and been gently transferred to Emily's car for the journey home, Alexander paused as Emily was gathering her things. Miss Carter, Emily, he said, using her first name for the first time. You have a remarkable daughter. Thank you, she replied, surprised by the personal comment. She mentioned that you're looking for a new school for her. Emily hesitated. Yes, the public school in our district is struggling. I'm exploring options for next year. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. I serve on the board of Westridge Academy. Their scholarship program is excellent. If you're interested, I could arrange for information to be sent to you. The offer hung in the air between them. Not quite personal, not entirely professional. A gesture that acknowledged Emily as a person with a life beyond serving his needs. That would be very kind, she finally responded. As she drove home that night, Emily realized that something fundamental had shifted. Alexander Reed was beginning to see her, and perhaps, through that recognition, beginning to allow himself to be seen as well. The real breakthrough came unexpectedly. 3 months into Emily's tenure, Alexander had been uncharacteristically distracted all week, checking his watch frequently and disappearing into his study for lengthy phone calls. On Thursday evening, Emily found him staring out the window of his office, a tumbler of scotch in hand, unusual, as he rarely drank on weeknights. Is there anything you need, Mr. Reed? She asked quietly. Alexander turned, seeming almost surprised to find her there. For a moment, his carefully maintained facade wavered, revealing something raw beneath. Tomorrow is my father's birthday, he said finally. He would have been 80. Emily remained silent, sensing there was more. I haven't visited his grave since the funeral 5 years ago. Alexander took a sip of scotch. My last words to him were in anger. We disagreed about everything, the company direction, my personal life. He gave a hollow laugh, or lack thereof. Emily took a risk. Would you like company tomorrow, if you're planning to visit him? Alexander's eyes widened slightly at the offer. That wouldn't be part of your job description. No, Emily agreed simply. It wouldn't be. The next morning, Emily drove him to the cemetery in her modest sedan rather than Alexander's chauffeur Mercedes. Another boundary crossed, another wall lowered. They walked in silence through manicured paths until reaching an imposing granite monument bearing the Reed family name. Alexander stood motionless before his father's grave. After a long moment, he spoke softly. He wanted grandchildren more than anything. Said all my success meant nothing without family to share it with. Alexander's voice carried no bitterness, only a profound weariness. The last time we spoke, he told me I'd built an empire but forgotten to build a life. Emily remained respectfully quiet at his side. I told him he was a sentimental old fool who didn't understand modern success. Alexander's jaw tightened. 3 weeks later, he was gone. Heart attack on the golf course. When he finally turned to Emily, vulnerability shimmered in his eyes. I've been proving him wrong for 5 years. Building bigger, achieving more. He gestured vaguely toward the horizon, and coming home each night to perfect emptiness. The confession hung between them, unplanned, unfiltered, utterly human. May I tell you something about emptiness, Mr. Reed? Emily asked gently. At his nod, she continued. After my husband died, Lily was just 2. Our apartment felt impossibly empty without him, no matter how much I filled it with noise or friends or activities. I thought emptiness was something to be feared and avoided. She smiled softly. But a wise woman once told me that emptiness is just space waiting for new meaning. The emptiness itself isn't the problem. It's the refusal to fill it with something true. Alexander studied her face. searching for platitudes or judgment, but finding only authentic compassion. "I don't know how to feel it anymore," he admitted. "Perhaps you start by allowing yourself to feel it first," Emily suggested. "Acknowledge the space before deciding what belongs there." As they walked back to the car, Alexander asked about Lily's father, the first personal question he'd ever posed Emily. She told him about Thomas, the high school sweetheart who had become her husband, his battle with leukemia, and the courage with which he had faced death at 27. "Lily has a smile," she said. "Sometimes when she laughs, it's like he's still here." Back at the mansion, Alexander paused before they parted ways for the evening. "Thank you, Emily, not just for today." It was the first time he'd thanked her for something beyond professional duty. Emily recognized the significance but kept her response simple. "You're welcome, Alexander." That night, for the first time in years, Alexander Reed slept without pharmaceutical assistance. His dreams filled not with business strategies or competitive analyses, but with images of laughter echoing through empty hallways and flowers bringing color to monochrome rooms. The following weeks brought accelerating changes to the mansion and its occupants. The formality between Alexander and Emily gradually yielded to genuine connection. Their conversations extended beyond work matters to books they'd read, music they enjoyed, and perspectives on life. Alexander began arriving home earlier in the evenings. His home office, once a fortress of solitude, increasingly became a space where Emily would join him, reviewing schedules that now included personal activities alongside business commitments. Sometimes Lily would visit on school holidays, bringing an energy to the mansion that had been absent for decades. The physical space transformed as well. Alexander, who had previously delegated all decorating decisions to professional designers, began taking an interest in his surroundings. When Emily mentioned her fondness for Impressionist art, he surprised her by replacing the austere modern painting in the main living room with Monet landscape. "I thought this room could use more color," he explained when she noticed a change. More significantly, Alexander began reconnecting with old friends long neglected during his single-minded pursuit of success. He hosted small dinner parties where genuine conversation replaced networking, with Emily naturally transitioning from staff to co-host as the evenings progressed. The most telling transformation occurred 6 months after Emily's arrival, when Alexander announced his intention to convert the mansion's unused East Wing into a center for children's arts education. Lily mentioned that her school had eliminated their arts program due to budget cuts. He explained to a stunned Emily, "It seems an unconscionable loss. This house has too many empty rooms that could serve a purpose beyond showcasing wealth." When the program launched 3 months later, with local children filling previously silent corridors with laughter and creativity, something remarkable happened. Alexander Reed began laughing too, not the practiced chuckle he employed in business settings, but genuine, unguarded expressions of joy that crinkled the corners of his eyes and softened the lines of his face. Howard, who had served the Reed family for over 20 years, pulled Emily aside one afternoon. "I haven't heard him laugh like that since he was a boy," the house manager confided. "Whatever you're doing, please don't stop." Emily protested that she'd done nothing extraordinary, but Howard shook his head knowingly. "You saw him, Miss Carter. Not the businessman, not the Reed fortune, but him, and in seeing him, you've somehow helped him see himself again." On a crisp autumn evening, almost exactly 1 year after Emily had first entered the mansion, Alexander invited her to join him for dinner on the terrace. The setting was intentionally intimate. Soft lighting, a single table positioned to view the sunset, classical guitar music playing softly in the background. Emily arrived to find Alexander uncharacteristically nervous, adjusting and readjusting the table settings. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Alexander gestured for her to sit, waiting until she was comfortable before taking his own seat. "I've been reflecting on this past year," he began, "on the changes in this house. In my life," Emily smiled, "there have been quite a few, all stemming from your arrival." Alexander's gaze was direct but gentle. "You've transformed an empty showplace into something resembling a home." "The mansion has good bones," Emily joked lightly. "It just needed some attention." As did its owner. Alexander acknowledged with surprising candor. "Emily, I don't quite know how to say this, but I need to ask," he paused, gathering his thoughts. What is this between us? The question hung in the evening air, layered with possibility. Emily considered her response carefully. It began as employment, she said slowly. It became friendship. And now, Alexander prompted when she hesitated. Now I find myself thinking about you even when I'm not here, Emily admitted. Wondering if you've eaten properly when you're traveling. Smiling when I hear a piece of music. I think you'd enjoy. Lily asked me last week why I talk about you so often. A blush colored her cheeks. I didn't have a simple answer for her. Alexander reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing hers. I haven't felt this way in, perhaps ever, connecting with another person without agenda or expectation. His voice softened. You came into my life as an employee, but you become essential in ways no contract could encompass. Alexander, Emily began carefully, if we're discussing change in the nature of our relationship, there are complexities to consider. I work for you. There's an inherent power imbalance. Then perhaps you shouldn't work for me anymore, Alexander suggested. The Reed Foundation needs an executive director, someone with organizational skills, emotional intelligence, and vision for community impact. His eyes held hers. Someone exactly like you, but reporting to the board rather than to me personally. Emily's eyes widened at the elegant solution. You've given this some thought. I've given you, us, a great deal of thought, Alexander acknowledged. I've spent my life building things that ultimately left me empty. With you, I've discovered that true fulfillment comes not from what I accumulate, but from what I share. He squeezed her hand gently. I don't want to be your employer anymore, Emily. I want to be your partner, in whatever way you're comfortable exploring. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Emily made a decision. She rose from her chair and moved Alexander's side, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. I think we've both been cautious enough for long enough, she said softly. Sometimes the most meaningful transformations require a leap of faith. When their lips finally met, the last walls between them dissolved. The mansion around them, once a monument to solitary achievement, had become a witness to something far more valuable. The courage to embrace connection despite past wounds, the wisdom to recognize that true wealth lies in shared humanity, and the transformative power being truly seen by another soul. In the end, Alexander Reed discovered what his money could never buy, and Emily Carter found security that went beyond financial stability. Together, they created not just a home from an empty mansion, but a life rich with purpose and authentic connection.